Okay, welcome to .NET Conf and .NET 6 launch recap. The .NET Conf was November 9th through the 11th of last year. It seems crazy that it's already 2022, time flies, but I'm pretty excited. There's a lot of great stuff that's come out, and I hope you'll get excited about it too. So basically, .NET is now becoming a united development platform. It's got cloud, web, desktop, mobile, gaming, IoT, and AI, as well as stuff. So from that perspective, it is becoming, and a lot of these slides that I pulled, I'll have the references and links to them. They're directly from various presentations that were technical presentations that were given during .NET Conf from the 3 days. So you could probably find the source with all if you want to dive deep or more information on a specific area. That I do attribute the ones to who did their speaking and the specifics about it. And then you can watch like an hour video for each one of those and go dive deep. So that I'm just doing what I thought was nice, the things I liked, and just some general information just to keep people on the same page. So that's kind of the goal with what I have for this. So on .NET Conf, they released .NET 6, and it has some major performance improvements, which we'll come over, as well as they updated Visual Studio 2022. That was a separate event, but that was released the day before. So there's a lot of tight integration between Visual Studio 2022 and .NET 6. And it's pretty close to being a complete library. So I just want to go over from where did that go? All right, so from an upgrading perspective, what you'll find out is they've released a great upgrade assistant. This is going from like the .NET framework 4.7 time all the way up to .NET 6, and it'll help you automate some things. I have some slides regarding this later on, but this is one of the things that is very bringing things forward. So I just wanted to point out that the .NET Upgrade Assistant is available for you, and it actually works pretty good. It's a guided step-by-step experience. And then so some of my favorite things that I've liked about the .NET Conf and .NET 6 in general, they've made significant performance improvements, which I'll talk to shortly. One of the lacking things that we had was, hot reload, being able to have that tight developer loop when you're developing. Visual Studio 2022, minimal APIs. I'm warming up to those. It's kind of a change on how you host your APIs. So you're looking at my radar to see if I can leverage it in the future. I wouldn't expect you'll be using that if you're migrating from a previous version of, upgrading .NET 5, because it's pretty drastic changes. One of the nice things with .NET 6, I clicked, is that Azure already supports .NET 6. A lot of times, even at .NET 5 and .NET 3.1, you had to wait a month before all the Azure services supported that version. Whereas this one's out of the box starting out right away. I'm also excited about a lot of the C# 10 features and enhancement that they have provided. And feel free to stop me if you have any questions along the way, and I can get a little more deeper in some specific areas. One of the key, very important is the performance differences. So it continues to be 10 times faster than Node. But the key part I want you to notice is on the right side. You can kind of see that .NET 5 Entity Core Framework performance is significantly faster. It's about 40%. Well, this 92% it can process more requests per second, but it's actually about 40% faster than .NET 5 for query performance. They've done a lot of optimization in the framework to support this. So this is pretty exciting to have the amazing performance that we have, that they've been able to do it. I'm quite actually surprised, because there was like a 40% jump from .NET 3.1 to 5, and now another 40 from 5 to 6. I'm just stunned that they've gotten out of this. And I've actually upgraded sites, and I can definitely tell you with load testing, you can definitely tell the difference. So hot reloading everywhere. I'm talking about all their things, including Blazor, your websites, your console application, everywhere. You make a change, it'll automatically reload. There's some caveats, but for the most part, it's all baked in there. So that's something that I've been looking forward to, as well as like .NET Watch be up support, so that you can use that to watch, if you're doing tests or other things, you can actually see this in action. I already talked about Visual Studio 22 a little bit. I jumped ahead, but basically, it's a newly rewritten to be fully 64-bit instead of 32-bit. So there's going to be, if you have those bigger Visual Studio solutions, you're going to find out that Visual Studio kind of really slowed up, bogged down because of memory constraints. With 64-bit, that you can now write drastically bigger Visual Studio solutions and use up all the memory. I'm kidding. All right, so the other thing that they've improved with Visual Studio 2022 is some of the new templates. So you gotta remember, when you go to Visual Studio and do new project, if you especially do SPA framework, you'll see one of the SPA frameworks is an older framework version. They've brought the framework version up to more modern versions, so you can out of the box get all the pieces you need, including Bootstrap and those things like that are newer versions. I said I'd talk a little bit about minimal APIs. It's making it easier, if you're like this, to be able to just do something like this. Create a web application, map a route, and return a response, basically. I said I'm warming up to it, so I don't know how I feel quite yet. I don't know if I found an out-of-the-box situation where it's as close to this, but we'll see. I covered a little bit about .NET 6 support in Azure today. It's there now. Well, it's been over there a month, so they've worked out all the bugs if there were any. I've tried out some of the Azure functions as well as the static applications and websites. So it's all as promised. So again, from a language feature, there's a lot to offer in C#10. This is just some of the things I like. There's a lot more than this, and I have the links in here to take you to all those pieces. But basically, I love the global usings and implicit usings, as well as file scope namespaces. Records before now were only for classes, but now they've added support for struts and some other features there. So that has rounded out that corner. They allow const interpolated strings, which it wasn't before. I think it's an added nice feature. They added additional, extended property patterns or nesting. It just makes it easier when you do new, and you can embed a complex job or a complex class representation without having to have tons and tons of lines of code. So that's nice. You'll find the full details at a What's New link and for C#10 in the presentation, which I will make available after the talk. I'm not going to go too much with how to use the different flavors. This is more of a recap and to get you interested and go search out the information yourself. But basically, just an example, global usings, you can create a file and put your usings there, and then globally you'll cut down all of the usings that you have. One of the nice features I like is namespaces. If you have one namespace for your whole file, why do you have to have a curly bracket at the top, at the bottom? This is really nice, where you could just say, hey, namespace is the namespace and the semicolon, and then you don't have to keep going to the right for all your brackets type of thing. So I think that's a big feature as well. And some additional things, if you're into more some of the Lambda stuff, they've created types for those and made the Lambda experience a little bit better. I'll skip to one of my other favorite things. I've been doing a lot of Blazor development lately, from a Blazor server side in the past to now currently Blazor WebAssembly with .NET 5, which I have to say the upgrade experience from .NET 5 to .NET 6 is change the moniker, and it pretty much works. No other changes other than upgrading your NuGet packages to be 6 instead of 5. So it's awesome. One of the nice things that they've added for Blazor is hot reload. Like I mentioned before, but it's nice to be able to change more than just your HTML and CSS and have it reload. You can actually change code and it'll hot refresh as well. Blazor is becoming way more mature. They've added built-in support for error boundaries. A lot of times when I was developing, you can handle your errors in your code, but if you have like a rendering issue, you'll get one of those yellow bar error messages, and it's not as a nice interface as the way that you want. With error boundaries, that fixes that. Another key area that Blazor's been a little bit light on was components. You were either create your own or you would need to go find a third-party component vendor. Microsoft has a Fluent UI framework that's more than just Blazor, but they've made it available for Blazor now too. So you can have a user common experience across all your applications. They focus on performance just like they did with .NET 6, so they've had a lot of trimming improvements. I'll talk about in the next slide about a few slides about what that performance actually is, so I'll save it for then. They also, you can have a trade-off, right? You want it to download really fast, or do you want it to be, since it's WebAssembly, it can run really fast, almost to if it were running natively on your machine. So you can actually do ahead of time compiling to WebAssembly. It's going to create a bigger download for your application, but it's going to be blazing fast because it's already, it doesn't have to JIT it when it runs. It's already ready to go. So there's a trade-off. If you're running performance-minded applications, you want to do ahead of time compilation. If you want, it's the smallest download size possible, go with the trimming and that built-in stuff. A lot of the areas that you're going to want to focus on with Blazor specifically, and this is all web stuff, is they have pre-rendering. They've always had pre-rendering, right? They didn't have pre-rendering with preserving the state. If you pre-rendered your application and you brought it down, you would see the markup as the users would, but they wouldn't be able to interact with it until it threw it away and redid it all. The reason why you'd want to have the pre-rendering is because SEO optimization, as well as from a performance perspective, you would want to have that on. Is there any questions? Okay. On to the next one. There we are. Then they had improved support for handling query string parameters. In the past, well, it's way better. Let's put it that way. The part that really excites me as well, or most right now, is that control HTML header content from inside your Blazor application. I know it's crazy to say, but in the past you had to run JavaScript just to change the title of your page that you were on after you went to a route in Blazor. You needed JavaScript to do it. They've added direct support for you to be able to do that from within your application. And this includes more than just like the title. Anything you would put in your head section, you can now, through code in your component or your page, change that. I mentioned that ahead of time compilation. Just a little there's a WebAssembly. This is an app. You have to opt into it and then download and install. But there's WebAssembly build tools that you would want to pull down for Visual Studio 2022 in order to give you the ability to do the ahead of time compilation. As I said before, it's a trade-off because it's going to create bigger download size of your application, but it'll be more performant if that's a need for you. The other cool thing that they've added, I think this rounds out a lot of things. Let's say I've heard people say that, hey, I've got this React application and I want to do some Blazor stuff. And it's always been before this or that, one or the other. With the support they have now, you can render your Blazor application as a components module in Angular, React, or Vue directly, and be able to then transition to Blazor from one of those other frameworks without having to do it. And it could be at a component or module level type of a application, more component. But so that's also pretty cool. If that's so, I also want to talk about some of the. Let's do the next page. Oh, I wanted to say one more thing here. The performance of the Blazor WebAssembly from .NET 5 was 1.7 meg. That's like the minimalist application you could make to download the framework and have a functioning application. With all the optimizations they've done, they've got it down to 1 meg. So they've got it getting pretty close to where the sweet spot where you would want to be. Obviously, you can, with some of the Vue, which is a lighter framework, you can get better. But from the feature you get where you can do C# in the browser and on the server, and you can share your validation between the two, I think that adds a lot of benefit to that as well. There's two kinds of hosting models that you can have with WebAssembly. One is you can host it on an ASP.NET website, and where you have the server APIs and your Blazor WebAssembly application would talk to the API in your local domain. In addition to this, and I've been using this lately, is having WebAssembly hosted as a static web app, and specifically in my case was in Azure, and then having the APIs being served up by Azure Functions instead of an application locally. So now that it's a static application, it's just static files you can download and run from anywhere. And so that the nice part about there is you can have the performance related to that, and then globalization, you don't have to worry about simplifying. It basically simplifies things. Okay, here we go. This is the slide that I talk a little bit more about. The published size for .NET 5 is 1.7, and they've reduced the size by 40%. And this is a fully functioning application, not this is just the .NET 6 runtime stuff. This is, you have an application that, like picture that application that does when you do file, new template, create a web app or a Blazor application. I'm talking about something like that, not just the framework and then your code. All right. So I touched heavily on the Blazor WebAssembly, but there is the Blazor server side things. There was a question out here about, does Blazor work for making non-native web applications? I'll get into this a little bit from a future slide, but I don't know if you can use Blazor on the desktop. It can integrate with, I don't know if you've heard, I'll talk about it soon, .NET MAUI. .NET MAUI is basically your web forms type application development, and you can use Blazor there as well. And then MAUI would we'll talk about MAUI later, but keep in mind that non-native web application, you can use Blazor for it, and I'll talk about more about it when we get to MAUI. The server side I didn't talk much about, but that's also a good model. It's going to have like a really fast, it's a way smaller downloads, because think of your ASP.NET website where everything's being done on the server side. Well, the Blazor server is that model, but they downloaded a little bit of JavaScript, and it uses a SignalR connection to transfer information. And you can have that same component model that you would have for WebAssembly or server. In fact, the code is, at least from a Blazor perspective, is identical. You could actually take a server application and you could target and say I'm a WebAssembly one with minimal changes, if any at all, and have it work as one or the other from your components and page and how you do that. But then it does also participate with the identity that you would have on the server side and stuff like that. So you wouldn't have to do a separate server identity type stuff. So that is pretty exciting as well. Let's see, this is one of the slides I pulled off. So this has some stuff in here. Okay, we talked about that. I talked a little bit about the Blazor Fluent UI components. Microsoft has finally entered and added some components because that's one of the weak areas they had, which was basically create your own components. And so a lot of third-party vendors, and there were a lot of good ones. So this is by no means you should stop your looking here. In fact, I can talk about, I pull up one I just looked at recently. They reached out and said, hey, we're doing some component stuff. And I pull that out there. Let's see here. Another example third-party component library is Blazorize. They do the same thing that the previous one did, but they have a free for commercial use, or for non-commercial use it's free, but for commercial use you have to pay for it. I know of some other ones. For example, there is Ruden UI Blazor components. They're free for commercial and non-commercial. They're actually pretty good. I'm using that for one of my other applications that I have. So there's an awesome Blazor GitHub webpage to go to, and that's maybe like your first stop shopping to find new components and anything to do with Blazor for type of thing. Okay. So this just kind of rounds out from for your resources perspective where you can get some of the .NET 6 and then Visual Studio. I've got more slides we're going to talk about as well, but this is a great spot for that. Next thing, there was a presentation that I saw that was really good. It was serverless for .NET 6 with Azure Functions. And I just pulled a few slides out from this one. Let's see here. And all these slides they've provided is from a technical link and one-stop shopping for all these type of thing. So Azure Static Web Apps, they're globally hosted. Let's see. I guess you can read this. I'm not going to read the slides to you, but basically free certificates. That's pretty cool, and custom domains for that. Okay. With that, you can do your traditional SPA application, or you can use Blazor to use your static applications. Let's see what else I got here. All right. Another cool feature that they had as well that this presentation kind of talked about, Azure Migrate. They actually have some resources and tools for you, and links are on the next page to talk about how you can migrate your ASP.NET application to Azure, or your SQL or some other things. So there's some really cool ways to get to Azure that can help you. Ooh, the screen doesn't look good, but there's some Azure migration tools. Another feature that they talked about was the Azure app containerization. Basically, get you 80% of the way there, maybe more, I don't know, to having a containerized version of your traditional application and running it on the Azure platform, as well as a discovery and assessment. So I didn't play around too much with these, but I did watch some of the demos, and it seemed pretty cool, promising, let's put it that way. So any questions before I jump to the next area? All right. I threw this in. There are another set of presentations talk about EF Core. I don't know if everyone is familiar with EF Entity Framework Core, and ORM, similar like to hibernate or hibernate, or but basically there's been this constant march to getting EF Core's performance constantly better and better. But basically, I'm not going to get into too many of these features here, but basically using link to write queries. Let's see here. Okay, I didn't write the slide. Okay. So they released some new features for Entity Framework that will help you, like supporting different SQL table type, temporal tables, and other things that that they're basically rounding out all the feature sets. They've actually added Cosmos DB support, so now you can, if you want to use a document database just like you would in Entity Framework, Azure Cosmos DB, you can. They're compiling some models, so they're basically, this .NET 6 was basically improved Entity Framework even more. That's how easiest way to say it. I've already shown a slide on this, but basically the performance is 40. Well, this is 92% better from a request per second, which is 92%. And then your actual queries will run 40%. Now, obviously, you still want to do all the things you normally would. If you're reading an entity and you're never intending to update, you want to make sure it has no tracking and all those things, all that's supported type of thing. I also want to say, from migrating application, is pretty much not much you have to do. It pretty much change it to .NET 6 and run it, if you're following the best practices from a coding perspective, you won't find a scenario where upgrading it will be challenging. If you're going from .NET 2 to 3, from 3, there was big changes there, so you have to be careful. But pretty much since 3.1 to 5 to 6, the upgrades and the effort you need to go through is minimal. Almost just recompile it and you're good to go. But I do provide links to slides coming up related to what's breaking changes and the things you need to work to look at there. So I promised I'd talk a little bit about .NET MAUI, and .NET MAUI can do Blazor stuff, but this is their solution to doing Windows development, Mac development, iOS, Android development, all on the C# and on this platform. And I think I don't know if I have any more slides related to specifically targeting Blazor, but you can picture Blazor as one of those items in .NET MAUI. Now, .NET MAUI didn't quite all of it make it into .NET 6, so they have a preview 10, which is currently available. This is 10 as of November 9th through the 11th, so there may be some other previews or other stuff that's coming out, but basically you'll be able to do this then. So let's see here. Pulled this slide from a .NET MAUI talk. Okay, they've done a lot of work around MAUI, and it's getting there. So definitely you want to check that out. I just want to put a list of presenters that I found particularly useful, and then I'll talk about where you can find a lot of the content you have here. I definitely recommend watching the videos. You can go and download and look at the presentations, but the videos, on all the videos, they did demos and things of that nature, and you'll find out a lot of information that you wouldn't, like the performance numbers and what they did to consider that. You can definitely get in and research some of that. So I've got some more resource and links in here. So this is where all the code and slides for .NET Conf are. I also put a link in here for the YouTube video. They, through some of the keynote first day, when they created in Blazor and some other stuff, but basically a podcast type application where they're showcasing all those technologies. I definitely would think you need to look at what's new in .NET Core 6 documentation. This is the actual MS docs that talk about what's new specifically. And then when I'm upgrading an application from anything, I look at what the breaking changes that they document, and they specifically create a migrate from 5 to 6. There's a migrate from 3.1 to 5, and so you can kind of get walk it up. When you're doing your migrations, I found it useful, especially if it's from an older .NET Core framework. You want to take the baby steps, 2.2 to 3.1, and then from 3.1 you can almost go right up to 6, because after that point nothing's really changed. But you do want to make sure you see the migration doc that says when you go to 3.1 to 5, 5 to 6, for example. There's several pages that talk about what does this performance that improvements look like, and so you want to look at some of those documents that I have here, as well as announcing some more information about .NET 6. So those are the links that I have there. So I think I actually blew through my presentation pretty fast, but I guess that's it. So does anybody have any questions? You can feel free to open up your mic and talk, or type it in the chat, up to you. Here, I can show my screen now.
So I guess I'll chime in with a couple things.
Sure.
With the migration assistant, one of the things I really appreciated, even if you're just going a single step from like 5 to 6, if you haven't been keeping your project files clean, it will offer to remove all the transient dependencies for you. So I thought that was a real nice kind of quality of life improvement as I was doing some migrations.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
There's a new data type called date only. And if I don't need a time, I don't need to use a date time. There's a new date only type. So the rest of the environment is not quite ready for it. What I'm thinking there is when I substituted date only for date time in some DTOs, my unit tests using auto fixture failed. So there are some support libraries that do need to be touched up. These are third-party libraries, though.
Sure.
The framework seems to be really good. And I was wondering if anyone on the line has tried the new HTTP logger that automatically logs requests and responses.
I have not. Anyone else?
Well, that's something I'm looking forward to trying out, but I haven't had a chance to try yet.
Me neither, yeah. So we do have some questions. If I've got a question here that says, on .NET MAUI, React is used to develop web and iOS in the same way. Can mobile web applications be developed in .NET MAUI? I believe, yeah. I didn't dive in as much in the MAUI side of things, so I really can't speak too much. My understanding from the high level is you can do mobile and web applications as well as and you can develop them in .NET MAUI. So I don't know if that makes sense. Feel free to, if I didn't answer your question, ping me or to chat about it. I see here, if you were building a greenfield project would you build the UI in Blazor, Angular, Reactor, Vue? Me personally, I actually am doing greenfield projects, and I definitely would. I have chosen Blazor for the development we have. The nice thing that I think Blazor brings to the table is you can run C# on the server and on the client. So a lot of times you're going to have business or validation logic that you would run on this client and the servers, and you have to write it twice, right? You would have to write it to make, because you have to validate anything that comes back from the web or the browser. You have to revalidate everything, and you'll write your validation rules, and then you're going to get down to the UI side of things. You're going to say, let's do the same thing, but you're going to do it using JavaScript or your framework of choice. If it's Blazor, it's C# in both places, and you can, just like you share models, for what you're transferring over the wire from your APIs, you can share your validation framework. So then, like, I use specifically Fluent Validation that way, where I run Fluent Validation on the server side and on the client. It's actually the same validation code. I bundle it with the model, the DTO that I'm working on. I actually have extension methods to do that, but basically I have it part of that package and the common things you share between the two. That's one of the nice things I like about having Blazor there. And in fact, with Blazor, you can get away with almost using no JavaScript if you don't like JavaScript. I mean, I like JavaScript, but if you don't, you could pretty much eliminate almost most of your needs or all your needs for JavaScript. Maybe unless you're calling out to some third-party libraries like, Application Insights or analytics or things of that nature. I hope that answers your question. I can elaborate more if you'd like. And I have another question here. Can you install MAUI without having to download the preview package? To be honest, I don't know this. I haven't played around with MAUI enough, so I can't answer that question. I'm sorry. I think I didn't cover it much. I thought I had another slide in there about top level statements. I like it because when I was teaching my daughter for programming, C#, we did many different languages, but we chose C#. And when I said file, new console applications, she's going, what's all this stuff? And I'm like, I don't know, you just got to do it, and all you want to do is write a console application, and they're having the top level statements and the global usings and all that other stuff. It just makes it, if you get down to write code, you can just write code, and the rest of it would work. And most of the time, your console applications aren't these huge beasts of an application where you'd want to have the full computer science methodology applied to it.